Hi, my name is Malone Gondo, and here's my presentation on the Stylistic Rebellion. We start in the age of control, where art was built sort of like architecture, as you can see, with the arches, the humanistic figures, and the loyalty and the symmetry. And it argues for reasoning over emotion. But beneath the marble, you can feel like a tension as the humans battle with the marble perfection trying to break through the grid. And this is sort of the calm before the rebellion. Here we see Turner throwing that control into the storm. It's just chaotic as the ship disappears into the motion and the canvas becomes sort of sensation. He replaces the clarity with chaos using color as sort of an emotion brushwork, like as the energy behind it. The geometry collapses, replaced by rhythm and the atmosphere. And the rebellion is sort of elemental with the truth being not found in precision. And here we see Goya turning rebellion into protest. It's pretty simple, with a sort of triangle of light focusing against darkness, but loaded with symbolism. The lantern becomes truth, and the soldiers become machinery, and the victim's outstretched arms sort of echoes the geometry of sacrifice. The rhetoric is emotional and moral, weaponizing light in composition to sort of expose injustice and serving as sort of a witness statement. And here, and sort of the Royal Academy wanted there were divine figures being represented in royalty. Instead, we see no gods or kings, just simply workers, and it's just a simple earth palette with heavy brushwork, rejecting ideal beauty, grounding art in the physical world. The geometry is flat and oppressive, mirroring the labor itself, and it's sort of a social realism as we are confronted, not comforted, and turning the canvas into a struggle, seeing what like the Academy ignored in their art. And we strip M&A here in this painting, strips away illusion and forces the viewer to face reality. Like as her body is unidealized, her gaze is direct, and the composition collapses depth, turning the painting into a stage of confrontation, using simplicity and shock to expose the hypocrisy and the Academy's sort of ideals of beauty. And it stares back rather than seduces you with the colors and designs. And here in Le Déjeuner, you see the mix of classical poses with modern people, as the perspective feels wrong on purpose, sort of, as the background figure looms large, the brushwork is loose, unfinished, and alive. And this is a rebellion through dissonance, as the art refuses to behave, refusing to fit the frame the Academy wanted, as Manet turns imperfection into an argument, proving that realism does not need rules to feel real. And here we see the impression sunrise as Monet turns rebellion into atmosphere with light paint. Not, and you don't see objects, it's sort of perception. The brushworks are quick and the form sort of dissolves as you go further into the painting. And he replaces precision with presence. Feels like almost like a memory to me, fleeting and alive, redefining what it means to truly see. It's calm. Here in the famous painting by Claude Monet and his water lilies, we see the rebellion has become meditation as the horizon disappears and the canvas becomes pure color and reflection. The geometry is horizontal, infinite, and almost abstract. Monet's work feels almost minimalist to me and emotional as sort of a quiet revolution where art becomes the environment. It turns observation into immersion, dissolving the boundary between the viewer and the world. Here we see the rehearsal as Degas rebels through composition, the figures feel cropped and tilted into space, and we see symmetry breaks. The geometry feels nearly almost deliberate, like a snapshot before photography existed. And we see imbalance as sort of a rhetoric turning ordinary movement into design. His rebellion is spatial and psychological, proving that infection can feel more human. And the cradle Morisot's rebellion is softness. She uses light and texture to create intimacy, rejecting the academy's sharp precision. The geometry is circular, the faces feel smooth, and it's nurturing and emotional. The brushwork just feels like a breath and sort of fleeting and almost human. And proving the rebellion doesn't have to be loud. It can be soft and still change the way we think of art. And we can see how Kase fuses the Japanese flatness with Western tenderness, as the composition is warm and geometric, and you sort of see like a triangle through the shape, with the flattened space breaking perspective rules, where intimacy became the design, and it's cultural and emotional, blending sort of worlds to redefine what art can feel. And in this Pissarro captures the chaos of modern life with glowing lights, rushing crowds, fractured motion. The geometry of the city becomes rhythm and not structural. His brushwork feels almost musical as it's urban and kinetic art trying to keep pace with the speed of modern change. Creating the city, it almost feels like a cell living, like a living portrait. And here in the famous Starry Night, we see Van Gogh transform emotion into geometry. The sky twists into structured spirals, and the village sort of anchors the chaos below. Each line vibrates with energy, and I just feel the color screams through the painting. And it's very intense as art becomes a psychological landscape, as as Van Gogh paints what he feels rather than what he sees, turning like this painting into sort of architecture. And here, Cezanne rebuilds the world from fragments. He breaks perspective into planes, turning nature into architecture, as the geometry is analytical but emotional, and the rebellion is structural. He dismantles the realism to invent almost abstract art. He shows that seeing is construction, not imitation. And this is sort of like the groundwork of modern abstract art. Here in the Scream, we see Munch turn emotion into distortion as the landscape blends with the anxiety of the person and the figure becomes sort of a vibration. The color is, you see the reds and the yellows as panic and the blue as despair. And it's almost existential as he uses the visual exaggeration to make the emotion tangible, as you can see the emotion. And honestly, I can sort of feel it as well. And here, the dream. We see Rousseau's rebellion is dream logic as the jungle feels flat, the figures float and blend, and the geometry it's sort of irrational, making little sense but kind of intentional the same way. He uses simplicity as surrealism, turning naivety into power, proving rebellion can be innocent and still radical, painting sort of imagination as the truth. Here in the composition 7, you can see the abandoning of realism entirely as color becomes sound and sort of shape becomes sort of emotion. The geometry is musical rhythm instead of structure. His rebellion is sort of a spiritual abstraction. It's just like a very surreal painting with him arguing that art doesn't need objects to communicate meaning. And here we see the vulnerability in the rebellion as the body twists into sort of sharp lines and empty space, rejecting the ideal proportion the Academy so desired. As the geometry feels broken, the colors are sort of almost raw to me, and the distortion as honesty, where the rebellion turns inward, making imperfection the focus of art and the truth. Here in I Am the Village, Chagall merges memory, fantasy, and symbolism as the composition floats with animals, people, and houses orbiting each other like planets in the solar system. The geometry is circular, emotional, and poetic, as it's sort of a narrative behind this painting, with realism turning into imagination with this sort of fantasy world, as people are upside down and they all blend together. And here, the final piece, we see Dashira ending rebellion with silence. The geometry is perfect, eerie. We see long shadows, empty street, and almost a place frozen in time as the flag stands still. And this is like the moment when the rebellion became a philosophy as art questions reality. We see that the academy is gone and modernism stands in place of it.